Perspective. Perspective is vitally necessary in making a scene look accurate. In other words, making things appear to be correctly placed in the foreground, background, and in between.
It's not an easy subject, but you've got to master it in order to draw comics. We'll make it as simple and clear as possible.
Before we can even begin to understand perspective, we must first learn the basic concept of a horizon line. Simply put, the horizon line represents the viewer's eye level. That's the spot in the picture where your own eye would be if you were there observing the scene. Now, this cube provides a simple example. Notice that the two sidelines on top seem to be coming together, the way train tracks appear to come together as they recede farther into the distance. Okay, then, let's continue drawing those two lines until they meet. The point at which they meet is the natural horizon line. That's our own eye level. And since the lines converge on only one single point, it's called, naturally enough, one-point perspective. That seems pretty simple. Even I understand it. Now let's watch John turn the cube like this. If we follow the new converging lines to their ultimate meeting place, we get a two-point perspective with a horizon line slightly above the scene. This is what our two-point perspective cube would look like, with a horizon line exactly at eye level. And here's how it appears with a horizon line below the cube. Of course, you'll seldom use one simple cube for your perspective. So let's see how these principles apply to the kind of scenes you might be drawing. In this drawing, despite the size of the scene and the number of the buildings, you can see how everything converges toward one point. Therefore, it's a one-point perspective. You can probably guess what we're about to tell you. The perspective lines are converging to two different points, but along the same horizon line. Thus, a two-point perspective. Well, it had to happen. An example of three-point perspective. The point at which the converging lines come together and finally meet is called the vanishing point. But here comes the tricky part. Look way up above the building. There's a vanishing point too, but it's merely an arbitrary point. Here's an example of a three-point perspective with a third vanishing point well below the horizon line. Three-point perspective drawings are really very common, so practice them until they look right to you. And remember, even when the third vanishing point is at an arbitrary spot, all of the perspective lines which do not fall on the horizon line must fall at the same arbitrary point, or else the perspective will be all wrong. For example, let's say you want to draw the inside of a room. Sounds simple, huh? But what about the furniture? It's got to look natural, like it belongs, not like it's just floating. That's what perspective is all about.
Notice that the vanishing points are at eye level in order to have correct perspective. No matter where the viewer's eye level may be, everything falls into place.
You might want to put the tape on pause and see if you can copy this next example.
Notice the way the chair is angled differently than the other pieces of furniture in the room. It gives us a third, a fourth vanishing point on the same horizon line.
Now, try not to get impatient. I know it seems complicated, but it'll all make sense as we go on, we hope. Learning perspective also means knowing how to tilt or turn objects without making them look distorted. And here's how it's done. We all know that a perfect circle will fit perfectly within a perfect square. But if we change the position of the square, the circle must also change. It becomes an oval. However, because it's in perspective, it still looks natural.
If we draw a cube, which is nothing more than two squares in perspective, side by side, then draw two ovals within the squares and connect the ovals, we end up with a wheel drawn in perfect perspective.
We thought you'd enjoy these particular shots because they show, in typical Marvel scenes, how we put the figures themselves into proper perspective. Now, notice where the eye level is in each panel, as well as the location of the various vanishing points.